Because the problem with unforeseen results is that they are unforeseen.
The September 10th Devstream. It basically boils down like this. Huge buff for Zerg tactics. Howitzers get spammed. The soldiery gets a faster and faster spawn location to get back into the battle. And you can spam tanks. Probably not the best tanks, but you can spam them. So Zerg gets a boost right away. And they balance that with new ammo types. Some pretty devastating ammo types that'll just rip the Zerg apart, which is that's pretty funny. They're also gonna buff the landing craft, and you know they're gonna buff the heck out of it and make it entirely too strong. Regions are gonna be broken into zones, and zones are gonna have well-defined borders. And they're going to use frontier bases to transition between region borders. So they're trying to end the stalemate that happens at the region borders by introducing a mechanic with some safety features to end that. And that's, hey, that's great. The user interface is going to get a pretty nice little adjustment. They stole it straight from Reddit, and I'm like, yeah, man, hats off to you. That's smart. That's the way to do it. So for the rest of this video, I tried to cut out all the uhs.
The spawn system was not one of those big things that right now it's really silly. The star-based system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Causes all these problems that make this war feel like very strange in some ways, right? That's something that we want to address for a long time. And number 3 there, some better support for wars that are long. The grind tends to be a bit longer, and we want to try to make adjustments in the game so that players are feeling progress on a more frequent basis, as opposed to just these long grinds to try to take a town, and then you either take it or you don't, right? Mm-hmm. And then also that 4th point there, with the artilleries, this is like sort of tied into number 1, which I'll get to, but a part of this also was just that we didn't want this update to just be like fixing systems and fixing problems. We wanted to add in something that was kind of fun too, right? So that's why that 4th point is there. So first I'll talk about some of the balance and quality of life changes. Production parts are gone. You no longer need them to produce your vehicles. You can just go up to a vehicle factory and make vehicles. We want to give players back the choice to just make a single tank if they want to. The next thing is your tank ammo is no longer going to require sulfur. To again go back to that feedback of the barrier to entry to things like tanks are too high for players that aren't working in a big group like a clan, right? There's going to be 30% more crude oil in the world. Again, increasing the opportunity that a player that previously didn't have access to things like a tank will, now be able to have access to it. And mortars and howitzers will now have ammo types that don't require sulfur. So again, this is going back to that same feedback, is that we want to give players more. We don't want to take away the strategic aspect of the resources. We want to add choice, right? So that if you don't, if you're not hooked into that part of the game, you don't feel like you're missing out on these things that you used to have, which again has been the thing we've been hearing so over and over again, is that all the fun stuff that I used to do is no longer available. We want to add back some of that fun stuff, but do it in a way where there's choice. Some of the game balance changes that I'm going to blast through, there's not much to talk about here, but we want to give some buffs to the half track, the light tank, the landing APC especially, which we've kind of heard this over and over again, that these vehicles are not worth their cost. Right? So
let's make it worth it.
Yeah, let's make it worth it. Right. And just to sort of have an example here of, again, the thing we've heard so much is that the barrier to entry is too high for something like a tank. So now you can see here, to field one tank, you no longer need 700 refined materials. It's only 140. You don't need the extra step. You don't have to go to the construction yard. You don't need a flatbed truck. You don't need a crane.
Yeah.
The ammo can be produced from salvage.
Yeah.
And there's going to be 30% increase in chance of getting fuel for your tank, right? So we really hope that this will be a step forward in helping to restore back that part of the game. But we're being very careful too, because something that I want to mention is I don't want to go in a circle, right? We were at this point before update 26 where resources, they didn't mean anything. I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah.
I want to move forward. And we're going to talk about some of the quality of life changes that we're going to be putting in. And again, this is based on a lot of the feedback we've heard from you guys. Restructured Logi towns. Matt, you can take this one away. I'm just going to blast through these points.
Yeah, just get through the points, because I have already talked about this in the blog. If you want to get into detail, I want to get in the blog. And
moving on to crates and stockpiles. I think we also discussed most of this in the blog, so I won't really go through it again. But this was the feedback that came from the subreddit. I think that it's almost like a direct implementation of it, but basically showing what's in a crate, showing the limits on how much can go into a stockpile, and also showing the quantity of items inside a crate. These are all things that they're all small things, but they're important things that affect the day-to-day operations of a Logi player, and hopefully smoothing this over will help with some of that. It's at the structure screens in the inventory, there's going to be a tab that lets you choose between the source of where you're going to be drawing things from, right? And the most important thing here is the resource containers at the refinery, right? So that you don't have to submit them and then like pull out the raw resources out from the refinery and then resubmit them back in, right? You can pull straight from it. So, again, this is the thing we've heard like a million times, right? And I think for quality of life, this is a big one, Matt.
yeah.
You haven't talked about this yet, right?
No, I haven't talked about this at all. I want to preface this by saying like this isn't like a fully like interactive like video tutorial with voice acting and all the stuff that you might expect. It is simply a rework of the existing style of tutorial that we have. I took a look at a lot of feedback about what didn't work from people in FOD, and I worked with Jeremiah again, and we architected this new version. There are a couple of really key features. Number one is there's going to be clear direction. We put these big, old, fat, painted arrows on the ground to make sure that people know where to go. The tutorial signs are easier to read. We put in some new stuff to make it so that they're easier to read and easier to understand. They're also in your way. So as a new player, you literally can't miss them, which I think is going to be a big deal. There are far more topics covered. You'll have a full area to practice with resources, with mines, with fuel, with all the different Logi structures. There's going to be water vehicles and beaches so that you can practice using the water vehicles without stakes. You know what I mean? So you can practice landings. Not all vehicles are going to be present. This is key because we still want you to play the game too. There'll be a lot more tools for player training. So if players want to run boot camps and stuff, there's so much more available now that you can actually cover as opposed to what there was previously. And some of the roadblocks that were in the way are now gone. So I hope this is better. And we'll only try to keep improving. And for now, while we can't do like a really big tutorial because things are changing so much, we can still make sure that this one has everything that you need.
Nice.
Cool.
I'm very happy with that. Particularly, I'm very happy because if people were helpful before training new people, and I think this is going to be great.
All right, let's move on to features and content, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a big feature update. First of all, is the new artillery ammo. And by artillery, I mean your mortars, your howitzers, and your field artillery, right?
Yeah.
So this is going to be kind of cool. Many of these types do not require sulfur or components, reducing scarcity on these weapons. So going back to what I said earlier, we want players, and I'll go ahead and sort of show you what the ammo types are. Again, we want players to be able to use these items again, and we want it to be less of a black and white thing. We can't use this item because we don't have sulfur, right?
Yeah.
If you have sulfur, you can do some of it.
Yeah, but you cannot do something else if you don't have it.
That's right. So we're keeping the strategic aspect while making sure that the barrier is low enough that players can still do the things that they find fun. We'll walk through how some of these work. With the first one, the flare. This is a cool one, Matt.
Yeah.
Want to talk about this one a bit?
Yeah. So this is going to work a little bit differently than exactly what you see here. But basically, when you fire the flare, it is going to illuminate. Not only is it going to illuminate nighttime, but it is also going to illuminate people who may not be in your normal line of sight in the dark.
Cool. Howitzer smoke ammo. So Howitzer smoke ammo is not just going to, one of the main features of it obviously is it's going to cover a huge area with smoke, which will turn off the AI defenses, or rather the AI defenses won't work in there, and
players won't have line of
players
sight.
can just charge in and get into a little bit of like a melee battle, or at least like a close range battle. Shotguns, anyone, will be quite useful in this. And they will cause a bit of damage as well. So it's not just smoke. It's actually useful as a little bit like a normal howitzer shell, but it just won't be as powerful against like things like structure.
Because if you get hit by a flying piece of metal across several miles, it's probably going to hurt.
It doesn't really matter if it's smoke or not.
Yeah, I think you're gonna get hurt from that, right? But the thing we're hoping to see is entire areas, front lines being covered in smoke, and sort of like being able to change the battlefield in that way. Right? So this is something that we're really excited about. Another one here is the green ash.
It's a large area.
This one is going to be interesting because I think that gas mask filters are probably going to be in high demand, right? Again,
it's gonna become the new currency of Foxhole.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're really interested in just one of the reasons why we've done this, besides being able to reach our goals with the economy, is that, well, first of all, we've heard these ideas many times over the last couple of years, and I think another thing is that one of the things that we want to do is always keep the combat fresh, right? And making sure there's like new ways to fight and sort of making sure that things don't remain static for too long, right? So this is going to be another one that's pretty cool. And finally, here's some of the remaining ones here.
They're very similar to the tank.
Yes.
The tank variations. So if you know how they work, expect it to be the same, but from a mortar and a field artillery.
Yeah. So if you look at this, here is a table of all the things, all the ammo types in the game, the requirements, their function, and the balance of these things are going to be changing on a constant basis over the next while, because we won't really even know how effective these things are 100%. We can make some speculation, we can try to tune it, but really we don't know what's going to be like overpowered and what's not going to be overpowered. So that's something that's going to be exciting for us to all like figure out over the next couple of updates, and hopefully we'll be able to settle on some things that work by the end of the year. So this coincide with some other cool stuff that I think
So these things could change. The requirements could change.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that goes with everything right now. But a lot of this stuff is setting us up for what we're doing in the winter update,
nice.
Which I think it'll make sense when we get there, right? So that's the ammo types. What else is there? Let's see. Oh yeah, we talked about this already. Faction-specific field artilleries. These are cool to see. Finally, these are one of the some of the oldest models we've had in the game, especially the field artillery. And I was playing around with the Warden one yesterday, and it's really, really cool to just finally have the Warden variant in there. It just feels more like a complete game.
I really love the new Colonial field artillery. I feel like it looks very powerful. It just looks like a cannon.
Yes. Cool. And then the buses, the troop bus. So this one is okay. I think this is like you guys asked for it, so you're gonna get it. And it's not quite the return of the relic vehicles, but at least it's a little bit of a taste of what was there.
Don't worry, there's more.
Not a lot more.
There's still more.
We're close to the end.
Yeah,
I told you this was
very
large.
close to the end.
So let's just take a second.
I think this is the
breather.
very first time, Matt, that I'm actually kind of like tired halfway through.
Well, we're more than halfway through. Usually we're in the
Like,
middle of like Q&A by now.
In the history of streams, I've never felt this way. It's kind of weird. Getting rid of a lot of the crap in the current system. Home bases, the infinite spawning, that's one of our goals is to, we know players have hated this for a long time. We've hated it for a long time, but to get rid of that was actually incredibly difficult. It seems like a simple thing, but we're getting rid of the star towns. The border forts have been removed, and they're going to be repurposed for something else that we're going to talk about in the next slide. And then we're going to come up with a new system, which is the deployment system. And this is a complicated system, and I would almost like to talk about this outside of the stream. But the two sort of takeaways from this system that I'll mention right now is it's more of a player-driven replacement for the home bases, and very complicated. But the summary of it is that players will have to station themselves at towns, and that effectively increases the amount of players that can fast travel there, essentially from the home regions, right? So the whole underlying concept behind this is that players can fast travel to where there are troops.
The idea is that those numbers will have to grow slowly by adding more players and saying, okay, you traveled here, so this is your base now. Oh, there's more players in this base. This base is more important. Therefore, more people can travel, and it's a compounding effect.
Yes,
like
exactly. So it will really help to get rid of the case where you flip a fort, and it turns into like a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
Right.
So another thing that this system will help is prioritizing that areas in which are seeing a lot of activity will be the areas that people will be directed to anyway, and the areas in which people, other players will know. Okay, if I go there, I know there are other players. They're not just spawning at a home base in the back line and then having to walk all the way to the front.
That's right.
Right. If there's a lot of players in the more nearby town that are assigned to that base, that means that you can spawn there.
Exactly. One way to look at this spawn system, because sometimes it's a bit difficult to get the point across, it's somewhat like being able to vote on where your previous star-based functionality is. You're sort of voting on by stationing yourself somewhere, you're voting where fast travel can happen. Great. So there's a lot more to that, and this is a system that is gonna take a lot of work.
Yeah,
it was a lot of work to get this in, and it's gonna require a lot of balancing, a lot of like fine tuning.
Oh yeah, the numbers are definitely gonna change.
If there is something that we have to ask with the system, is that you don't freak out if it doesn't work perfectly at the beginning, because I can tell you right now it's gonna require work. But we sort of rather want to get started on this sooner rather than later, right? Frontier bases, I'm going to go over this really quickly, but essentially it's a replacement of the forts that can be built by the players. If you want to, you can only build a frontier base, which, as we mentioned, is a replacement of the forts, of the border forts. If you own the region that is on the other side of the border, and the enemy owns the region on the side that you're trying to build it on, and it has to be in the travel area. So you can't just walk around and build these frontier bases in all these cheap locations, which I know a lot of you are going to try to do at nighttime, especially, right? We're clamping down really hard to make sure that the frontier bases are there to serve the purpose to stop the region lockdowns, but to not be exploited for all these other things, right?
In a nutshell, in order to build a frontier base at a border, you need to have the neighboring border. We're correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, with some extra rules around it.
Yeah, with some rules. I mean,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in a nutshell, that is the big gameplay impact as of right now.
Region zones, right? Regions are broken up into zones. Essentially, zones have a border that is actually exact now. So names.
Yeah, so they're now, like, you guys are really familiar with all the different areas in the map. You know, you talk about like Transient Valley and Abandoned Ward and all the different places in the world. And now they are either going to be classified as a major, in other words, a region zone, or minor, which is just kind of like a
Lore
yeah, just like a determination just to help you coordinate a little more, like fine tune. And each of those major regions, which are going to be associated with either a fort or base and or a town hall. So they are either a town or a major location in the world.
Right. So this is where we've repurposed the forts to be in these locations, but the forts are going to be changed in such a way where their costs, their facility costs, and generally their like behavior is going to be much more like a town hall. We're going to like remove all the weird magical parts of it. Like they only cost like 50 mats, or they're not. They're going to cost a lot more now. The facilities are going to cost the normal cost of a facility. So basically, one of our
one thing to point out, which I meant to mention while I was talking about it, is that like this is only like a really initial pass to make sure that everything is kind of like, you know, in a good place and works. There is going to be more to this feature in the future. So
which is the next point there.
Yeah, great, perfect. I see what's going on. And so
to add to that, this is laying the groundwork for something bigger that is coming in the winter update that we think is going to make the world a lot more cool, and it's something we talked about in the far past before that we never got around to doing. We're going to come back around and finally doing that thing. Here's another picture of how the world is going to be split up into region zones, and yeah, so that's pretty much it. Again, fall update is a step forward. It's not necessarily the biggest update in the world, but we hope that these step forwards will help lead us to the winter update.